Real Talk starts right now. Here's Ryan Jesperson.
Well, Real Talkers is kind of the case every time we join you, every time you join us. Thanks for being here after a couple of days out of the studio every Monday. First episode of every week. Supriya Dwivedi joins us in our feature interview presented by Mercedes-Benz Edmonton West, and a lot of ground to cover in this episode. You've seen the headlines, no doubt. Most folks will wake up to this. An Air Canada flight, a Jazz flight, colliding with a fire truck at the LaGuardia Airport. 2 pilots dead. We don't know a lot at this point. Curious to get Supriya's take on that one and yours. It reiterates to me, and I'll save the conversation for Supriya, about the pressure that air traffic controllers are under. We're going to play some audio for you that has been released, confirmed and released. They oftentimes put air traffic controller as one of the most stressful, pressure-packed jobs on planet Earth, and it's obvious why. More on that in just a moment. Commentary continuing on the value of Pierre Poilievre's appearance on the world's #1 podcast with Joe Rogan. I want to pick Supriya's brain on that. This is always the case when a story develops and we still have to wait 3, 4, 5 days to check in with Supriya. We always wonder what she's going to say about this. We're going to bring you a couple of different opinions from Canadian commentators and politicians across the political spectrum. Is there a common theme to how they're reviewing that appearance of the leader of the official opposition down there on the Joe Rogan Experience? Alberta's premier wants security clearance. We'll talk about that. Trump wants the Strait of Hormuz opened. Everybody wants the Strait of Hormuz opened, except for maybe the Iranians. We'll get to that. And we will leave time a little bit later on in this episode for more of your feedback on medical assistance in dying. We mentioned MAiD last week as Alberta's our home province, making it more difficult to request MAiD, adding more barriers. Many of you were saying you think it's a good thing, including a guest on our show last week. Had an interesting conversation with an advocacy group. If you missed that, you can always find it on our podcast archives. But Real Talkers are telling us their personal stories in emails to talk@ryanjesperson.com. Obviously, when you're evaluating or maybe even forming your own opinion on big subjects like this one, on medical assistance in dying, sometimes it's that firsthand testimony, people that are walking the miles, so to speak, people with the lived experience that will resonate most. And we vow to make time for that. We told you last week we would in this episode, and that's exactly what we'll do. Before we get to Supriya, I want to let you know that our friends at Hanson Distillery are getting perilously close to selling out mini Yeggs. This is this limited run, this special edition candied milk chocolate cream liqueur. Absolutely fantastic stuff. And we told you right as they were releasing it, coming up on about a week and a half ago, I think they put it out, that they did just 2,000 bottles of mini eggs, and so we expect that it will sell out. And the update from Hanson is that they're just about there. So if you want to get your hands on a bottle or a case, I saw our friends at SIP on 124th have mini eggs prominently featured in their window display. Always good taste from the folks at SIP. You can find mini eggs wherever you buy fine Alberta spirits. You can, of course, pop into Hanson Distillery, 174th Street, 111th Avenue, or you can buy it online. They'll ship it at hansondistillery.com. Hanson is always made right here.
Nothing like a drink that eats like a meal, Ryan. I'm just kidding.
We've been hearing from people that are telling us how they're most enjoying it. They're had, so whether they want it on the rocks, in the coffee, as a shot. Anyway, it is Monday at 8:30 Mountain Time, 10:30 Eastern. So maybe we can get off the booze talk just for a quick second as we check in with our good pal Supriya Dwivedi. It's nice to see your face. People that listen to this on the podcast or that see the episode later on YouTube, we would call it our trimmed episode, right? So after the live stream, the pre-roll, the 5 minutes that leads us in, is shaved off. So it's typically the live streaming audience that sees it. That would include you on Monday mornings. And I have intel from our production crew that you were enjoying the summary of my one-on-one with W. Brett Wilson just coming up on a week ago. What did you make of it?
Was it Johnny just telling you what my face looked like in the Zoom queue?
That's pretty much it. I'm sitting here and we're just getting ready. You know, I'm putting the headphones on, making sure and he goes, "Oh, Supriya's really enjoying the highlight." the W.
Well,
Brett Wilson highlight. So
I just like seeing people squirm. That's all. Especially, it's a real feat, I think, for any interviewer to be able to make the interviewee kind of visibly look like they're uncomfortable. It means you're doing something right.
yeah, it was. It was. He didn't necessarily come on just to talk about orphan wells or just to talk about whatever, but we've had those conversations on the show, including Alberta's environmental liabilities, and I mean, Brett Wilson has opinions on lots of stuff. And he had reached out to us when Corb Lund, you remember when I talked to him, the country singer had invoked his name. And he said, I got a letter, an email from my friend, Brett Wilson, and this, that, and the other. People are bound to hear it. The minute I heard Corb say his name, I go, okay, well, we're probably going to hear from Brett Wilson on this one. So, hey, kudos to him for showing up for the interview. I appreciate it. I actually quite enjoyed the conversation. We may see a few things differently, and obviously that orphan wells story, he, I think, was eager to have an opportunity to present his side of the story, because I've seen it in practice. Like, anytime he makes comments on social media, his supporters are like, yeah, Brett, you tell him. And then everybody else is like, clean up your wells. Your wells. So I think he wanted the opportunity to talk about it, to set the record straight. I don't know that he did. It sounded kind of like, I had a company or was a big part of a company. And then when the company was sold, the assets, which are really liabilities, moved with the company. So it kind of wasn't his issue anymore. And, that's kind of the whole problem. We don't need to rehash the whole orphan well thing on a Monday morning, but that's kind of the whole point. That's kind of been the whole problem. That's the issue that most people have with the energy regulator. And if people want, they're listening to this, they can hear my conversation with Mark Doran. He's a landowner advocate, the day after we talked to Brett. And he's like, yeah, that's the whole problem, is that everybody's just been selling off these basically insolvent oil companies for like $1. I may be exaggerating, but then these liabilities
like you're passing
go with
the buck,
them.
right?
You're passing the buck, and
Yeah.
landowners and everyday Albertans are the ones getting screwed on it. And I guess if you want to expand the conversation, Canadians are getting screwed on it, because the feds have, at least at one point, there was an appetite there under your former boss, Prime Minister Justin Trudeau, who I think sent $1 billion to Alberta mid-pandemic to try to start to clean those up. But everyone will tell you that knows the number far exceeds that. So it's always a bit of a gut punch. It's one of these things where, especially living in Alberta, loving Alberta, being proud of Alberta, it's one of those things where it's like, man, we haven't really represented ourselves well and protected the public, protected our land, in a way that you might expect, at least if we're going to be a sort of a forward-facing, future-looking society, and that includes our industry, right?
Yeah, totally.
Yeah.
100% agreement.
So it's late Sunday night at LaGuardia. I think it was like about just after 11:30 p.m. And it just feels like kind of a standard. You're like, if you're on one of these flights, it's an Air Canada Jazz flight. I'll reference reporting at the Globe and Mail. People will see it wherever they're getting their news updates. But I don't know. It's a flight from Canada to the U.S. It's not like it's been some big international flight. I recognize that accidents can happen anytime, but it just feels like almost like a commuter flight, Supriya. Probably a lot of people, a lot of people on that flight, 72 passengers, 4 crew members, I don't know, making their way into New York, maybe meetings on a Monday morning, what have you. And then you have this collision. I'll get your take on it. Obviously, we don't have a lot of details right now, but why don't we roll the audio first? This has been confirmed and released to the audience, what you're about to hear. This is air traffic control audio. You'll hear just before the collision, and then you'll hear the immediate response from the controllers. Professional throughout, at least that's what it's about. Like, very steady delivery, especially when you consider what they've just witnessed from the control tower. But here it is.
Truck 1 and Company, LaGuardia Tower, requesting to cross 4 at Delta.
Truck 1 and Company, cross 4 at Delta.
Truck 1 and Company, crossing 4 at Delta.
Frontier 4195, just stop there, please. Stop, Truck 1, stop. Stop, Truck 1, stop. Stop, Truck 1, stop. Delta 2603, go around, runway heading 2000. Jet 646. Jet 646, I see you collide with a vehicle here, just hold position. I know you can't move. The vehicles are responding to you now.
Is the runway closed?
Delta 2603, go around, runway heading 2000.
Heading 2000, go around, Delta 2603.
LaGuardia Tower.
Truck through 2, runway 4 is closed, correct?
Yes, go on to runway 4 now. Proceed on runway 4, you have access. Frontier 4195, I got the word that we're going to be closed for a little while. If you want to prepare to return to the ramp, let me know.
Yeah, we got stuff in progress for that, man. That wasn't good to watch.
Yeah, I know I was here. I tried to reach out to my stuff, and we were dealing with an emergency earlier, and I messed up.
No, man, you did the best you could.
Oof. So, yeah, I mean, obviously a few things jump out at that. Number one, communicating presumably with the fire truck, going stop, truck one, stop, like, you know what I mean?
Yeah.
And then at the end, and then they're, I'm sure we'll have an air traffic controller that's watching this or hears this could maybe shine some future light onto this, but then they immediately go into disaster management where now there's other flights that are coming in, right? And they're communicating, and then you hear these two controllers, and he goes, man, that was tough to see. And he goes, I tried. He goes, I messed up. The air traffic controller says, I messed up. He goes, you did the best you could. I mean, ugh.
Look, I don't have anything particularly insightful to say other than the fact that I can't imagine, what that air traffic controller is going through. I can't imagine what the passengers on the ground were going through. Two pilots, the pilot and the first officer are been confirmed dead by Air Canada. A number of, I think it was 40 people that have been taken into hospital that I read earlier this morning. So the whole thing just seems like a slow motion nightmare. And to your point, Ryan, about this being, I get that accidents can happen at any point, but this really does feel like a commuter flight in some ways. Montreal to LaGuardia, super common. I mean, I've taken that flight myself a gajillion times in the past. And it's just one of those things where you kind of have to question, given all of the cuts that have happened under the Trump administration over the last year or so, was LaGuardia properly staffed? Did they have, enough folks that were manning those air traffic control towers? And could this have been prevented with, more appropriate resources in staffing?
Yeah, who knows? It's also this isn't a profound observation, but something that kind of surprised me, and I recognize, this is a good reminder to people, even why they tell us to slow down in school zones and all that kind of stuff. But they said that the plane was traveling 39 kilometers an hour when the accident happened. It wasn't one of these kind of things where it was just coming in, landing, going 300, coming down onto the runway. Just one of those things where, obviously as pilots too, in a plane, you're exposed, you're right there. You collide with anything at 40 kilometers an hour, it's going to have obviously a huge impact on the structure of the aircraft itself, and the pilots were right there. Jason Ambrosi, who's president of the Airline Pilots Association, has confirmed that their union's critical incident teams are there assisting investigators. They expect the runway to open later today, but said in a statement, these pilots dedicated their careers to the safe transport of passengers. We're all thinking of their families, loved ones, and the colleagues at Jazz Aviation. It was a Jazz plane under Air Canada's banner. During this devastating time. I was saying off the top of the show too today, and I'm sure that the FAA, and there will be investigation and they'll kind of sort it out. It's interesting to be privy to that audio, that air traffic control audio, hours after this tragedy. But you think of the stress and the pressure of that job of air traffic controllers. They are consistently listed, like, they say these top 10 lists of the most stressful jobs, and that's always right up there. And then you think of the pilots,
never do it.
Too.
Like, could you ever do that job? I can never do that job.
And Johnny, I'm not going to drag you into this, except I am dragging you into this as well. I would say, like, you and I, it's amazing that we're able to work together like we are, because I think our brains function similarly. And it's like by the end of a day, or by the end of an episode, or by the end of a shift, we've typically got everything covered. But I'm very poor at, like, tactical following the list, Supriya, or like ticking off one thing after another, or staying focused. My brain's kind of all over the place. Yeah. And I think, like, to be an air traffic controller, you have to have an absolute command on everything.
Oh yeah.
And I'm not saying that this is what happened. We don't know what happened here. Sounds like it could. Again, it's not even responsible for me to speculate. Sounds like it may have been the person driving the fire truck, perhaps, or maybe who knows what happened. That maybe made that mistake, but it's like a split second, or sure, something. Yeah. Something's off your radar, no pun intended, for like 2 seconds, and you can have a mass tragedy, right?
Well, you hear how fast they're talking, like their brains are just ticking a mile a minute. Yeah. But also, like, we weren't hearing the truck driver on there, right? So when he said, my bad, I'm like, I heard him ask the truck to stop multiple times. So yeah. I feel bad for him.
Yeah. Jordan, by the way, pointing out in our live chat, powered by Park Power, says the shell of an aircraft is rather fragile. I would imagine, I mean, I don't know anything about aircraft, but just these tubes, these tunnels, when you look at the photos, and most people will be listening to this on the podcast, but I mean, the nose of that plane is just blown. It's blown to pieces. It looks like it crashed at 150 kilometers an hour. But I mean, at the end of the day, we're not going to solve this. We're not the investigators. We have very limited information, but it's just something I think we wanted to talk about and address because it involves, obviously, presumably Canadians. Happens on American soil. You don't see stuff like this all the time, and I just feel like it's one of those things where we just take it for granted. They always say, too, that the majority, I've never fact-checked this to know if it's actually accurate, but they say like the majority of people's car accidents happen within like a certain proximity to their home or their work. Like it's oftentimes people are tired leaving home or tired arriving home or whatever the case may be. We sort of go through our everyday lives, just, business as usual, on your way to do this, that, and the other. And sometimes life changes in a flash.
I mean, or it's just when you land somewhere, like, don't you instinctively like text your wife, be like, landed safely,
We're
babe,
here.
or like, vice versa, like when she's traveling without you, like it just goes like, I don't know, like sometimes you take those texts for granted. And it's like, the next time I end up texting somebody that I've landed safely, I'll be extra grateful sending that text.
Interesting point from Sean in our live chat. I didn't know this. Says mandatory retirement for air traffic control in the United States is 56 years of age. Amazing. I had no idea. Les says, I can't stand flying. I have a tough time being a passenger in a car. He says it comes, I think it's a thing about trusting other people. Marie also says, look at people instantly jumping all over this guy, talking about lawsuits and suing. People need to give it a break. Way too early to talk about that kind of stuff, but obviously something we wanted to talk about. We were going to lead with the Joe Rogan interview. It's a few days old now, but I think that also means, especially with his, I don't know if you call it, it's not really long form. They're long podcasts. The episodes are long. The interviews are long. So I think that a lot of folks would have taken the weekend to have a listen through. Before we get into some of the clips and what some prominent Canadian commentators are saying about it, what did you make of Poilievre's interview on the Joe Rogan Experience?
Yeah, so I would say not only like his Rogan appearance, he had an interview with Bloomberg, which was a sit-down interview, and then he gave a speech on Canada-U.S. trade. I thought all of them were very good. I thought his Rogan appearance, that part probably garnered the more of the attention, and I think that was a very, by any measure, it was like a success for him, right? But I would also say that people kind of had a seemingly low bar for him. And look, I'm irrespective of where that bar was, I think he did very well, but it strikes me as sad when a good chunk of the commentary surrounding the appearance on Joe Rogan was like giving him praise for, not saying that Fidel Castro was the former prime minister's father, right? Like a bunch of people were like, oh, what a masterful gambit, not taking the bait. Or like there's a bit in the, when he's talking to Rogan where he says Canada will never be the 51st state. And yes, that's a very good thing to say. But of course, he probably should have been saying that a whole heck of a lot more, particularly about a year ago during the election. Right. So again, like I think he did well. I don't want to take away from that. If you're a conservative supporter and Poilievre's your guy, I think the last week of interviews and public appearances should make you feel proud. But I think just in general, we should maybe be expecting a little bit more from the leader of the official opposition than not going all in on like very easily debunked conspiracy theories.
Here's the Castro clip, by the way. It's like Rogan baits the hook, casts it out there. Rogan being Rogan. Let's get to it. We can comment on it in a sec, but here it is.
I started reading about different things. I read a biography on Fidel Castro, and then I read
Justin's dad.
No, not Justin's dad.
Right?
No. His dad was Pierre. His dad was Pierre. I had issues with Pierre Trudeau too. Because
it is a great conspiracy theory, though.
Well, it is a hell of a. I don't think it's a true one though. His dad is Pierre. his dad was very controversial while I grew up because he did a lot of damage to the oil sector, and we're from oil country. And so that was one of the things that I felt kind of resentful about the national government. And one of the reasons I got involved is because the West deserved a fairer deal. And
so he goes on from there. And, your face is, what is it? Not demure? No. But if the goal, if his team is saying to him, stay focused, don't take the bait, bring it back, he did a pretty good job. Sure. Again, like you're saying, he wants to be prime minister. You should be able to do a good job. People would expect that you do a good job in circumstances like that, but of bringing it right back to like the National Energy Program, Pierre Elliott Trudeau, that sort of a thing. Had he not, I mean, he chuckles. He's able to chuckle about it. That's fine. It is kind of a ridiculous conspiracy. For those that believe it, it's quite a compelling one. Everyone sees like the photos side by side. Some people really truly believe it. But had he found it too entertaining or gone too far down that or laughed too long or replied with a wisecrack, then, I mean, because the stakes are high on this, right? Like the stakes are high. If you say the wrong thing in that interview, even if it's 5 or 10 seconds, it's going to be weaponized against you for years.
Yeah, totally. I don't disagree with any of that. I think that's all correct. I just think if, again, an official leader of the official opposition is going on a media tour, we should expect them not to, I guess, entertain wild conspiracy theories. That's all. I just think it's a more of a reflection of the sad state of Canadian political discourse when this is seen as some sort of great heroic rebuke of a conspiracy theory, right? Like it should have been like from the onset a silly thing to have asked, and Rogan should have felt dumb asking it to begin with, which he clearly didn't. I think he still kind of entertains it, and that's not on Poilievre by any measure. I'm not suggesting that it is, but I just think it's like a larger kind of sad reflection of our own politics that's where we're at. Because I mean, think of the alternative. Had and it's like impossible that Jean Charest would have actually won that leadership race, but let's say Jean Charest was right now the leader of the official opposition. Nobody would have expected him to go in on that conspiracy theory. Aaron O'Toole, same thing. I think the fact that we're even saying that this was like a good masterful gambit on behalf of Poilievre is because he has in the past indulged perhaps not this conspiracy theory but other conspiracy theories, and under his leadership the party definitely seems much more open to conspiratorial type thinking.
Johnny, let's get the oil sands clip because I think that was another interesting moment. Lorraine is watching our live stream presented by California Closets on YouTube, says performing at the lowest level of expectations is not a win. Pierre should also not be down in the States representing Canada. Tracy says leader of the opposition has a role in Parliament, not on the world stage. Our leader is the Prime Minister. Says this is a shameful waste of conservative funds. Let's see if Tracy or Lorraine, maybe they'll change their mind. I don't know on Pierre Poilievre's advocacy for the oil sands. I don't know if Rogan was I don't know what he's trying to do here. He almost sounds like an environmentalist for 3 seconds in this clip. But here's another moment that I thought was particularly interesting.
You could be out in a forest hunting and you wouldn't even know that under your feet they're extracting it through a whole system of pipes where they inject just steam vapor that loosens up the oil. It sinks down, it goes into another pipe, comes up to the top, and you can have beautiful, pristine nature, the bears, the deer, the birds. They don't even know that there's extraction happening under their feet. So we have the best industry, the most responsible industry anywhere in the world. It's been a really disgusting PR campaign by extremist environmentalists and frankly some of our competitors to try and make our industry look bad, but it's the best industry in the world.
Yeah, they got me.
Yeah,
I saw some videos on it and I was like, oh my God, what are they doing to the ground? What are they doing to the earth? It looks horrible.
It's all bullshit. We have the
It looks horrible.
Yeah, but I mean, that's just a superficial look at it. I'll take you for a tour in the oil sands. You'll be amazed. We have the best engineers in the world. And by the way, the First Nations people absolutely love it because it's lifting their people out of poverty. They're getting enormous job opportunities out of it.
Okay, so not all First Nations communities absolutely love it. I've talked to Chief Alan Adam about it, Athabasca Fort Chippewa First Nation. They don't absolutely love it, but it is true that many First Nations communities and other communities in close proximity have obviously been. I mean, hell, communities in Newfoundland have benefited from the oil sands. But if Pierre Poilievre were to convince Joe Rogan to come up to the oil sands, this would be like the James Cameron aerial tour, but flipped. And Joe Rogan were to be convinced and to use the platform of the world's biggest podcast to advocate for Alberta and Canada's energy sector, that would be a huge win, wouldn't it?
Yeah, totally. And look, even if he doesn't get Rogan up there, I think just the fact that he was able to advocate for, the oil sands on such a large platform is good. And I actually, I can certainly understand why some people, like the folks in the live chat, were saying that he shouldn't actually go down. We have a prime minister, and that's what the PM's job is, and it's not the job of the official opposition. But I think, quite frankly, in a situation like this, where we're up against a hostile, U.S. administration, where in the throes of a renegotiation process, it's kind of like an all hands on deck sort of moment. And I think it should be considered a positive that, Pierre Poilievre went down in his capacity as the conservative leader and official opposition to make inroads, wherever he can, because I think this is no disrespect to the prime minister whatsoever, but I think it's much more likely for a Joe Rogan invite to be extended to a guy like Pierre Poilievre than it would be for a guy like Mark Carney. And I think the fact that Poilievre is using that to his advantage and to Canada's advantage, quite frankly, is a good thing. Now, we can quibble with certain things that perhaps he should have said or points that he should have made, but I just think in general, the more Canadians you have going down that are all singing from the same songbook, which, to, again, Poilievre's credit, it very much seemed like he was doing there. He said in that Rogan interview at some point that he, has a great mutual respect for the prime minister, and he was texting him, keeping him abreast of some of his trip while he was down in the U.S. I think those are all good things.
Yeah. This is interesting point here from Sandy in our live chat, powered by Park Power, your friendly local utilities provider. She says it's telling that Pierre had to leave the country to get a fair shake in the media. I don't buy that. I know. Go ahead.
I don't buy that either. No, you go.
Well, I know that Pierre has had a combative relationship. Some of it he's invited upon himself with more as the, when I say aggressor, I don't know if that's a bit of a heavy word to use, but as the instigator, certainly of that, calling for like the CBC to be defunded. And I wouldn't even put him anywhere close to Donald Trump on Trump's adversarial relationship with the media. Like, that's apples and oranges. I'm not trying to sound ridiculous. But that has been kind of like a long-standing, generally speaking, like sort of a conservative gripe that the liberal media, the progressive media doesn't treat conservative politicians fairly and the like. And maybe there is some evidence of like a progressive media, holding conservative politicians to, I mean, they probably hold them to the same standard they hold progressive politicians, but it's a progressive standard. So I guess I can see that point. But there's plenty of conservative-friendly media in Canada, and Poilievre has refused interviews, or at least has been hesitant to accept interviews with a lot of Canadian outlets, including this one, by the way. We continue to work on that. Ambustion in the live chat says, until he does Real Talk, I just don't care. So we'll look forward to that interview. But I don't know, like someone the other day was in our chat saying, Poilievre does Rogan, Carney goes on Jon Stewart, says Rogan's audience crushes Stewart's audience, which is true. Like 5 to 10 times, if you base, if you buy the American ratings on that. Do you think Mark Carney ever would do Rogan? Would it make sense?
So I don't know. Here's what I would say. I think generally, there's no point in going to sit down for an interview if it's impossible to get to a point of a shared reality, or get to a point where you're at least operating from the same set of facts. Now, you saw there that Poilievre was able to push back on certain instances where Rogan perhaps wasn't completely up on the facts, but it was, I would say, still characterized as a friendlier interview than I think a Rogan would take with a progressive politician. That doesn't mean that he should wave it off from the jump and never go on in terms of the PM. But I would also just say that the PM I don't know if Rogan's audience is who the PM is supposed to be appealing to right now. And I would suggest that the Prime Minister perhaps has much more important things to do than to sit down for like 2.5 hours in Austin, Texas, with a guy that, harbors a few conspiracy theories and tends to push them out.
I saw someone here. I can't find the clip or the comment anymore. My apologies. But someone said, I've never heard Mark Carney say bullshit in an interview. We're really getting into the minutia here.
Yes.
I kind of like when he said, that's all bullshit.
Me too.
I like
Yeah.
I like the candid nature of it. I think the one risk maybe you take is that, when people are talking about environmental liabilities or people are talking about the impact of the oil sands, to indicate that those concerns are all bullshit, I think might be a little bit risky, but also consider the platform, consider the context, consider the host, consider the audience. I didn't mind it.
Yeah, no, neither do I. But the sort of last thing I'll say on this with respect to like the way Poilievre sounded and the comparison to like, wow, he can't get a shake in Canadian media. The reason why he can't get a shake in Canadian media is because he never sounds normal. Right? Like the thing that people really took away, I think, from the Rogan interview was he had a normal guy vibe to him, right? It was normal guy talking normally.
Yeah.
That's what that boiled down to. There weren't any weird 3-word slogans. He wasn't, chomping on an apple and being rude. He was just being a normal dude.
Just
I think if he did, yeah. And I think if he did a lot more than that, he'd probably be seen in a better light, not just with conservatives, but like a larger swath of Canadians.
Former NDP leader Thomas Mulcair, so you have to imagine
he's like the Jim Cramer of Canadian politics, this fucking guy. Whatever he says, do the opposite. So
okay. Oh, well, I apologize in advance for playing this clip, man.
No, it's fine.
But it's been like I can't pin down Mulcair lately. He's been all over the map on stuff, which actually for as a fellow commentator, perfect.
But I'm going to help you out. Being a Quebecer and having seen his evolution,
okay,
he's a conservative. He's a whatever. He's a Quebec liberal, which means in the rest of the country, he's basically a conservative or a progressive conservative. And his big claim to fame is losing 59 seats for the NDP. So. Great job.
I remember that election. I was working in terrestrial radio then, and I remember having him. He was on the campaign trail, and he came into the studio, and I interviewed him. And at that time, it was like this was before JT had kind of like rocketed up the middle, kind of Ed Stelmach style. Little Alberta reference for you there, applied to federal politics. But I remember at the time, it was like, it almost felt, I'm exaggerating a tiny bit, but it felt like it was Mulcair's election to lose. Or at least, there was. Anyway, here's Thomas Mulcair years later talking to our pal Vashi Kapelos, evaluating conservative leader Pierre Poilievre's not just the performance on Rogan, but that entire trip to the U.S.
I thought he was super well prepared, and for something that was going to last that long, every time he would get to something tricky, like a good slalom skier, just make the right move, slow down just enough, get through it, wouldn't touch some of the obvious traps, was really thinking about what he was going to say. I thought it was an outstanding piece of political communication, and it was bookended by a speech that he gave later on in New York that, frankly, one of the best political speeches I've heard any Canadian political leader give on Canada-U.S. relations in a long time. He's ditched that tone that used to drive everybody up the wall. He was on the same serious tone that he used at that economic conference in Toronto recently. And the content of that speech, on top of the proper tone, was outstanding. He gave a better explanation as to why it was a mistake for the Americans to be pushing tariffs when he talked about the fact that Trump's main argument was, Canada's got a trade surplus with the United States. Yes, we do, because we're selling you $100 billion a year of oil that we sell you cheap. And do you want us to stop that so we can get rid of the trade surplus? He didn't quite finish that sentence, but he just left it hanging there, which is another artful thing to do. So I think that between the Toronto speech and the New York speech and the appearance on Rogan, we are indeed starting to see a whole new Pierre Poilievre, and it's one that I think the Canadians are going to warm to much more than they have to the tone that we've seen from him in the past.
Okay, so the former leader of the NDP predicts that Canadians are going to start warming to the current leader of the Conservatives. Bold statement.
It is a bold statement. I think if Poilievre is able to maintain said tone and is able to maintain said, what I was referring to as normal guy talking normally, if he can do that, sure. But I don't know. He's had some of these tonal resets a few times now. The past ones haven't been successful. Let's see with what this brings. It certainly seems as though if he's able to, continue on without the 3-word slogans and without, reverting to kind of the sort of childish, adversarial nature of the way he goes about things, which tends to turn off a good chunk of Canadians, then yeah, maybe. But I still think that remains to be seen. And I, if he's able to do that, I think that's good. I think it's good to have a competitive official opposition. I think it keeps the government on their toes. And I think, just for his own self-preservation, I think the more he can convince his own caucus members that he is taking criticism seriously and he is, looking forward, like about how he's going to gain some of those, voters that he would have lost over the last year and a bit. I think that makes it a lot safer for him. But again, all of that remains to be seen.
Marie says they should both, Poilievre and Carney, they should both go on Bill Maher and smoke a joint with him. I mean, yeah, sure. Prime Minister of Canada smoking a joint with the leader of the official opposition. Chances are zero. Bunny Slippers says the average person who watches Jon Stewart, Stephen Colbert, and the like doesn't need to be shown things via big red crayon. JJ says Poilievre was on Rogan because they have several shared values as bros. Says Poilievre didn't do a bad job. But the reason he was there is because they both share an insane amount, says JJ, of questionable values. Jordan says Poilievre's only preaching to his congregation. Tracy Fact Check says she heard Carney drop an F-bomb in an interview recently. Amanda says it's funny how Rogan was talking about legalized weed in Canada. Poilievre failing to mention in the interview he voted against legalization. Kat says Carney was really great on Scott Galloway on Prof G, but then again says Scott is very smart. Ken K rightfully points out Daily Show in the audience, very different demo than the Joe Rogan experience for sure. Always Rolls says the Venn diagram of people who like Joe Rogan and vote for Poilievre is already a perfect circle. I'm glad he wasn't an absolute embarrassment, but he gained nothing. I do think he made gains in it, actually. So all in, but there's a recurring theme as well in our chat, including from Ms. KD, who says Poilievre's doing all this to take the spotlight off Jamil Javani. There's a lot of people talking about the trips to the U.S. and whether or not he should be down there, and we can't ignore an interesting trend. And I want to pick your brain on the big picture of it, of Canadian politicians traveling down to the U.S., right? I mean, obviously the Prime Minister, it makes sense. Leader of the official opposition, down in front of Americans, prominent stuff. It obviously impressed them all care. Javani's a good example. Danielle Smith is a good example. Do you have an inherent issue with Canadian politicians, leaders or otherwise, making their case in front of Americans? Does it make sense?
Yeah, I don't have an inherent issue, but I think with respect to Premier Smith as well as Jamil Javani, I don't know if they were singing off the same songbook, like I referred to, just a little bit earlier. With respect to Poilievre going down, he was keeping, apparently, according to him, keeping the Prime Minister abreast of his meetings and what he was doing. It seems like there was at least a heads up given. With respect to both Javani and Premier Smith, I mean, I don't know if that was necessarily the case. And in Javani's, just because it's more recent, so it's in my memory a little bit better, he seemed to come back to Canada to sort of chastise us that we were the ones holding up the trading relationship, and came back to spout MAGA talking points back at Canadians. And I think for the vast majority of Canadians, we look at the situation that's been going on for the last year and a bit with respect to the U.S., and we're not. It's the Americans that are very clearly being unreasonable. They're not negotiating in good faith. They are dicking us around. And I think for a regular, normal, average average Canadian voter, you look at that and you aren't going to side with the American side. You're going to side with the Canadian side. And I think in Mr. Giovanni's case in particular, he seemed to side a little bit too closely with the American side of things.
Okay, I want to, we got to move on because there's a million things we want to talk about. But one interesting point here that's recurring in our chat that I want to bring up, Jill says, will Poilievre be able to talk normal guy talking normally and be able to build credibility with women without losing his manosphere base? Tracy D says, I feel like it's gaslighting, and if I fall for it, I'm just going to pay for it later. Like being in an abusive relationship when the abuser cycles around to being charming for only just a bit. And Jillian says, if you've ever watched a friend stay with an abusive man, it's very hard to watch Canadian political commentators trying to convince us again and again that this time Pierre Poilievre might have changed. What do you think about Jillian's comment?
Yeah, so I mean, I don't love the comparisons to abusive relationships, just because I think that's, maybe not the most apt comparison, but I certainly get what the through line there and what the point is. I think that's likely right insofar as, to my earlier point, there have been several attempts at a pivot that have been unsuccessful. That doesn't necessarily mean this one will be unsuccessful. There is now a new campaign manager for the Conservatives, Mr. Steve Outhouse. He has a really good reputation amongst Conservatives. He also was on with Vashi Kapelos yesterday. He had said that it was Poilievre himself who had set up his interview with Rogan, which I thought was a neat little tidbit there, that he was just, texting Rogan back and forth himself to figure out calendars and scheduling and what have you. Look, I think it's a good thing if we can have the leader of the official opposition be a normal guy talking normally. Unfortunately, I don't know that's what the Conservative base necessarily has been angling for. I think particularly under Pierre Poilievre for the last few years, the Conservative Party has gotten more explicitly conspiratorial. They've gotten more explicitly aligned with some of the Maple MAGA undercurrents that exist within Canada. And I don't think those are good things. If they can move away from that while also encouraging their supporters to move along with them in that same responsible way, then I think that's an amazing thing. I think it's incredibly bad for Canadians and for our general social cohesion if you have one of the major political parties that are going all in on conspiracy theories and care more about, winning points online than they do about moving policy along.
Miss Katie follows up, by the way, says, I don't really care, just like about politicians, Canadians heading down to the States, says, just like I don't mind Premier Ford running ads in the States. If Americans hear Canada's stance, they'll put pressure on their government. The only thing about the Ford ads running during the World Series was that Donald Trump laid it out. Those ads are what prompted him to blow up Kuzma negotiations. Take it from here.
He did say that. You're not wrong, right? But I would just point out that before he decided, Donald Trump that is, that he was super against the ad and was super offended by it, he initially said it was fine and that he saw it and that he would also take out an ad. So it's very clear that somebody got into his ear from point A to point B from when he decided he was going to have a hissy fit. And look, I fully understand the line of thought of like, we shouldn't go around trying to poke the orange mad king in the eye. And for certain folks, the Ford ad was akin to that, like going out of our way. But I disagree. Like, I think Ford did a good thing by trying to appeal, I guess, to these so-called Reagan Republicans and reminding them that Reagan was a free trade guy. Like, that's fine. But what's dumb about it is that I don't think there are very many Reagan Republicans that exist, right? I think, like, for the vast majority of folks that, I mean, you'd have to be under 40 to be, or over 40, 45 to begin with to even remember who Reagan was as president. So right off the bat, you're cutting out like a huge swath of Americans that you're trying to appeal to. And then the other thing is that I just don't think for the modern day Republican Party, I don't know if they see Reagan as kind of the flag bearer for that. I think they've evolved. And I think it was, quite frankly, kind of shitty of Mark Carney, the prime minister, to throw Ford under the bus the way he did when Trump decided to take his ball and go home. Because the line you heard from the prime minister and those around him in the immediate aftermath of that was that it was the premier's fault, that it was Ford's fault, the fact that negotiations were called off. But Ford pulled the ad. It's been months and months since he's pulled the ad. So it's, to me, it was like always going to be this negotiating tactic on behalf of the Trump administration to take their ball and go home. It's written all about in The Art of the Deal that this is, frequently what he does. So I thought it was a little unfair that Ford got so much of the blame. And I say this as by no means being a Doug Ford fan in Ontario.
We're hanging out with Supriya Dwivedi in our feature interview presented by Mercedes-Benz Edmonton West. I got to ask you about Alberta's Premier Danielle Smith wants security clearance to be able to get CSIS briefings, basically on foreign interference. And that had Nenshi, Alberta's official opposition leader, says she can't be trusted with it. I want to pick your brain on that, see where you land in just a quick second. I'll let our audience know that this conversation in every episode happens with the support of Athabasca University, Canada's open university. Your online experience at Athabasca University will be unlike anything else through your post-secondary journey to this point, or maybe this is where you'll kick it all off with their world-class accredited online degrees and courses designed so you can complete your education wherever and whenever it works for you. You can check out the applications and admissions process online at athabascau.ca. Learn more about student supports, transferring credits, tuition and fees, future student information. Never too early to get started. Grade 11, grade 12 students, or maybe those of you, they call us the mature students. John, I was once a mature student. Going back to post-secondary, AU brings so much to the table, and if you check out the website there, athabascau.ca, you'll be able to read why more than 500,000 people, more than 500,000 alumni are talking about the benefits, including more than 90% of them that say they're working in a job related to their field of study. That's incredible ROI at Athabasca University. Again, online at athabascau.ca. Hey, did you catch our Real Talk Roundtable, our most recent one on Friday? That was this was the Alberta Women's Health Foundation coming together. It's Women's Health Research Month through the month of March, and really fantastic conversations around how women continue to be underrepresented and underserved in healthcare across the country. Make sure you check out that episode. Really solid stuff. Well, that was the 20th of March. If you want to check it out in our podcast archive or on YouTube, really eye-opening. And if you want to take action from there, we want to refer you over to Alberta Women's Health Foundation.org. It is Women's Health Research Month. You can consider a donation to the cause or just learn a little bit more about what's happening in women's health. Again, that's Alberta Women's Health Foundation.org. A couple of weeks ago, Kerry Williams in the House from North Road Investment Council, that was the 24th of February, he joined us on the show talking about how AI is having a huge impact on markets. In particular, Kerry was talking about tech stocks, but of course there's a ripple effect that may be impacting your portfolio. North Road Investment Council offering a second set of eyes to real talkers right now. You can request a meeting with them, have them take a look at your current investment strategy, even if it's somebody outside of the North Road team that's been managing your investments. What's wrong with a second set of eyes? It could be a dramatic improvement made to your family's strategy as a result. You can connect with the team at northroadic.com. You make sure you let them know you heard about it on Real Talk, and they'll extend you a discounted rate. How cool is that? Again, that's North Road Investment Council online at northroadic.com. And before we get back to Supriya, to our Metro Edmonton audience, a quick heads up of a couple of things coming up with our friends at the Edmonton Chamber of Commerce. You know, a chamber membership is your business's most valuable investment. Learn more at edmontonchamber.com. Their first annual Edmonton Chamber Curling Bonspiel set to go on the 27th of March. That's coming up this Friday. Still some spots available, so you can register your team for action at the Shamrock Curling Club. It's an all-day event. It's going to be an incredible time and an opportunity to connect with chamber members in one of the most uniquely Canadian ways possible. They're welcoming folks from all skill levels. You can register your team for the Edmonton Chamber Bonspiel today at edmontonchamber.com. Our good pal Supriya Dwivedi, former senior advisor, can I try that again, Supriya? Former senior advisor to Prime Minister of Canada, Justin Trudeau, and a longtime colleague, of course, of mine, joining us first episode of every week. I was curious to get your take on this. Alberta's Premier Danielle Smith says she's seeking security clearance. She wants to receive briefings on foreign interference, or alleged foreign interference, we'll say, in the province of Alberta. It would be an elevated security clearance. Naheed Nenshi, NDP leader in Alberta, says that she can't be trusted with it. Is this unprecedented? Does it make sense for the Premier? Where do you land on it?
So, look, I'm not going to question her motives for trying to obtain a clearance. I think it's perfectly reasonable for premiers to want to get a certain level of clearance so they can be, kept up to date on the threats that are happening within their own province. I believe Mr. Nenshi was questioning her judgment, given the fact that she's accepted rather lavish gifts from the Saudis in the past, and that can put into question, whether or not there are any character vulnerabilities there. But just to pull back the curtain for folks a little bit, look, I would have had to go through the process to obtain a secret clearance twice. First in 2021 when the PMO had first offered me a job, and then again in late 2023, which is right before I had started in January of 2024. And then I had to go through the process of a top clearance just within a couple of months early into 2024 after I had gotten the job. And, the questions that they ask you are all kind of dependent on your current life circumstances, like what they're really trying to get to. Aside from, the formal forms that you have to fill out in the interview process, is they're trying to assess any vulnerabilities that you might have. So, for example, in 2021, I didn't really get any questions about any potential debts I may have had. In 2024, I did, because in those 3 years, I had a pretty big life change, right? I went from having a steady dual income household, being happily married, to then being a widowed single mother. So in 2024, I had a ton of questions like, did I incur a ton of debt for Anoop's end of life care? Was there debt regarding, funeral expenses or costs or things like that? Were there any, extra medical expenses that I would have had that I hadn't properly listed or accounted for on any of the forms? Versus, the kind of more standard questions I would have gotten in 2021. So I think that all makes sense. And I would imagine that should Premier Smith continue on the process, her questions, she's going to get a few of them with respect to her relationship with the Saudis. And I don't think that, off the jump necessarily disqualifies her. But it certainly does put into question, I think, her overall judgment. And I think if I was Mr. Nenshi, I would also question her overall judgment with respect to, disavowing the separatist elements either within her party or within her caucus. But I think on its face, premiers should want to get cleared so that they can be kept abreast of the threats that are happening within their jurisdiction.
Yeah, is it hypocrisy or no? We're talking about, I'll note, provincial versus federal politics, but for people who are critical of Pierre Poilievre for not getting his security clearance, I recognize it's two different levels of government, but is it hypocritical to criticize him for not getting security clearance and then criticize a conservative premier for attempting to get security clearance?
Yeah, totally. It's like either you get a clearance and people should get clearances so they can be made aware of what's going on, or you prefer that people are sort of kept in the dark. Like, for me, it is an incongruency and I wouldn't know how to square that circle. Unless there's a very compelling reason for a political leader to not want to get cleared, and I don't know what that would be, quite frankly, because I think all of what you've been hearing from Pierre Poilievre thus far is that it would be essentially a gag order. I think that's quite frankly bullshit. I think there's plenty of things that you can say and do within the realm of getting briefed that doesn't just blow the lid off of, all sorts of classified information. I think there's a way to go about it. For whatever reason, he doesn't see it that way. And again, there's nothing glaring overt in Mr. Poilievre's, background that would suggest he's doing anything untoward, but it just is a little bit weird that he is so adamant about refusing to get cleared when he's literally the only opposition leader that has yet to get cleared.
I still haven't had anyone, and I guess I'm not asking you to make the case, to argue the case. It's not your job. But I still, I feel like I spend a lot of time trying to understand politics, like too much time, actually. I should probably go touch grass more, but I spend a lot of time reading about and thinking about politics, and I still have not read one compelling argument for not getting clear. I actually don't understand it. Like, what am I missing?
I don't understand.
I know,
it
that's
either.
what I said.
Yeah,
it makes no sense.
I find it very weird, and I think a lot of Poilievre's defenders will say, well, he already had one in the past, so he doesn't need one. And it's like, what the fuck are you talking about? Of course he still needs one. Just because he had one in the past doesn't mean it's like exists in perpetuity, right? And also, when he did have one, he was a single dude. He wasn't married. Like, now he's a married father of two. So, like, just like with my circumstances, that I had a major life change from 2021 to 2024, he also has had a major life change from the last time he would have held a clearance. So it doesn't automatically mean because you had one in the past, you're going to get one again. And I think, again, these are all fair questions. And Poilievre has yet to give a real compelling answer as to why he hasn't come around to getting one yet.
Super Chat Ken is checking out the live stream presented by California Closets on YouTube. By the way, shout out to Super Chat Ken. Johnny, he was the winner drawn at random by my 10-year-old son Wyatt out of an Oilers toque. We had all the names entered, Supriya. Everybody who donated $100 or more to my Alzheimer's Pro-Am hockey tournament fundraising qualified to win 2 seats to watch the Tampa Bay Lightning beat up on the Edmonton Oilers on Saturday night, unfortunately. But Super Chat Ken, the winner of that, Ken, thanks for your support. Thanks to everybody for your donations. Amazing. Really appreciate it, guys. We're right around $4,000 right now, so that was amazing of Real Talkers to step up. Super Chat Ken says, if I'm CSIS, I don't advocate for Smith to get security clearance. Even, like you said, Supriya, if her clear support for separatists to get a referendum is political survival, there's too much at risk if it isn't. Here's what Nenshi said. I mean, here's a quote as reported by the Canadian press. Quote, I sure as hell wouldn't give her security clearance. She's not taking it seriously. Perhaps, this from Nenshi, perhaps because she's inviting this foreign interference, because as we know, she sees nothing wrong with taking gifts from foreign actors and foreign governments. That can work in 2 parts. Number one, you could talk about American influence and dark money supporting Alberta separatists. That, I think, is a thing, and it's something that should be on people's radar for sure. But number two, Smith, just about a week ago, her office confirming that she and members of her staff did accept accommodations, traveled on private planes provided by the Saudi government during a trip last fall, approximately 6 months ago, to Saudi and UAE to discuss political collaborations on energy development and artificial intelligence. Is it inherently wrong for a politician to accept, like in the media world, we would call this a junket, right? Like if a correspondent or journalist, typically not a journalist on a junket, but like, let's say a good example would be a travel writer that accepts, Tourism Jasper is going to fly in a travel writer from New York City, and they're going to bring him out and they're going to stay at the Jasper Park Lodge and they're going to ride at Marmot Basin, or maybe they're going to play golf in the summer, and then they're going to write a feature piece on, how Jasper is like this incredible place that everybody should go to. Typically that journalist or that correspondent, that writer would disclose that they were hosted by the team at Tourism Jasper or what have you. This is a hypothetical example. But in politics, obviously everybody wants to know like who's on the take or who's benefiting from what, or what are the incentives or the carrots that are being dangled. If people want to dig deeper into this, there's a theory that has not been confirmed nor verified that Smith accepted a golden cat statue from the Saudis. Some people are saying it's worth $300,000, and it's on display in her office right now. It's not been confirmed. No, it's okay. Not here's the theory, Johnny. Do you know it's like it's there? No, like if legit like 30-year career legislative correspondents are not reporting on this, I'm going to hang tight and keep my powder dry on this one. But folks are suggesting that this golden cat, you can see it here. She had the meeting. Johnny was showing the photo already with Calgary Mayor Jeremy Farkas, who, by the way, is going to be on the show, Real Talkers. Double whammy, Friday, April 17th. Calgary Mayor Jeremy Farkas, Edmonton Mayor Andrew Knack in studio together right here in our historic Mercer Warehouse studio. But there's Farkas and Smith talking. There's the golden cat in the background. I guarantee, I don't know if I can guarantee, but I can virtually guarantee the Premier of Alberta, no matter who it is, would not accept a $300,000 statue and then just place it in her office for all to see with photographers there. But I digress. The flights, the accommodations, is it inherently wrong or is it a gray area? What do you think?
So I would err on the fact of it being inherently wrong. But I read some of the explanation that was provided with respect to, I don't know if it was the Premier herself or her office, had said that apparently where the meetings were taking place were going to be at a very difficult to reach airbase or something like that. That very well may be the case. But if that is the situation, then you kind of should disclose that upfront and proactively, and you shouldn't let it come out after the fact, because on its face, even if it's not necessarily a conflict in and of itself, there is an appearance, at least, of a conflict, and generally that appearance of a conflict is enough. I think whenever you're trying to be above board, it's always good to disclose as much as possible, which perhaps the Premier's office did not do here. But I don't know if that in and of itself should be a disqualifier for her from getting a clearance from CSIS. I mean, and that'll ultimately be up to the Intel and NatSec agencies to determine her readiness, or if she can obtain one. But it's the whole thing just seems like, as a general rule, maybe don't accept these lavish flights on private jets and golden cats. Like, that's just a general rule of thumb, I guess. I don't know.
I don't know about the golden cat, but I did see a tweet from I don't know if it means anything.
Well, I can show you this one.
Cameron Davies.
Cameron Davies. So Supriya, this is like a little bit like most people, and I don't mean this as an insult, but most people would not know who Cameron Davies is, but like Alberta political insiders
Republican
definitely know who Cameron Davies is, and he has this like strange collaboration. I can't say collaboration or Lukaszik's going to call me, but Thomas Lukazik and Cameron Davies have been like working together on some things, either behind the scenes or up front, but like very strange bedfellows. And Cameron Davies would like certainly cheer. I think maybe not just, I shouldn't put words in his mouth, but definitely would see Alberta as, moving in the direction of sovereignty. Whether or not that would be the 51st state, I don't know. But here he is. So he tweeted on the 20th of March, Johnny. Says the cat. Says it's about a foot tall. Says it's like 10 to 12 inches tall. Came in a pretty cool black carry box, red silk lined, a few gemstones on the base, and a plaque with the Saudi prince's name on it too. So there you have it. That's from Cameron Davies.
I saw this one that says, I have personally seen this golden cat. It exists. The PO is sloppy and didn't check to see who operated at the shop they had it evaluated at after receiving it. Compromise doesn't begin to describe this Premier or her staff.
So there you have. So people, if you want to go into a rabbit hole on X later today, you can search golden cat and see it. But I'm like bigger picture. The cat or not, I know a lot of people are saying the cat should be in the Royal Alberta Museum. I saw somebody.
There's already a Twitter, like an X account. Everyone's loving it. It's like a whole thing.
Yeah. But bigger picture, I mean, politician on the take. That's what people are concerned about, obviously.
Yeah, and I think that's a concern. It's a legit concern. I don't think anybody wants to have politicians on the take, and I think if it was, if this is an issue for the Premier, then again, come clean. Like, that's the best way to sunlight, best disinfectant, et cetera, right? If you if you put everything forward, then there's no rabbit holes to go down because everything's just out there in the open.
Okay, before we go, there's two big stories, obviously, that'll be developing over the next week. We'll wait to talk to you. First episode of next week as well, but the Strait of Hormuz, everybody needs it open. Global trade is obviously impacted in a major way. It's like basically the most significant stretch when it comes to the movement of energy around the world. The question around what role Canada will play in that, just a quick hit, something people should keep an eye on this week.
Yeah, look, I mean, I think Canada has already said that they're willing to help. I think the issue that we have right now is that we don't really know what kind of help that means, right? We don't really have any details as to how we'd get involved or to what level we'd be involved. And I understand that there are a bunch of countries that are having those conversations, and I expect those conversations to be ongoing. But I think the political vulnerability right now for the Carney government in particular is that if this is seen, right, if Canada participating with our allies to help open up the Strait of Hormuz, if that's seen as being a favor for Trump or Netanyahu, or is otherwise, perceived as looking as though Canada is coming to bail out Trump and Netanyahu for this incredibly myopic war, I think that represents a bit of a political vulnerability for the Canadian government.
All right. And finally, and we'll talk about this more as we know more and as we see it develop. But, the federal NDP members across the country, pretty big week for them, pretty big month for them moving forward. What's one angle on it that you're keeping an eye on?
So I think right now it'll be interesting to see, from my perspective, what the Quebec sort of reaction is. I think traditionally, and NDPers have seen a path to their success coming through Quebec, but of course, none of the contenders really have much French language skills. So I'm curious whether it is, apparent frontrunner Avi Lewis, or if Heather McPherson is able to cobble together support, or let's say Rob Ashton is able to cobble support on the second or third ballot and they end up winning. I'll be very curious to see what their kind of, first kind of French language interviews or attempts at winning over Quebec will look like.
Yeah. Hey, we always love checking in with you. We appreciate your insights, and we will do it all again a week from today. Have a great week.
Sounds good, buddy. Talk soon.
Okay, you got it. That's Supriya Dwivedi joining us in our first episode of every week, courtesy of our friends at Mercedes-Benz Edmonton West. I want to get to the live chat on this. By the way, Justin Fist Pound in the chat says, I was a mature student when I went back to NAIT for my degree as well. Something about the mature student thing. I mentioned that in the Athabasca University review. You've got all your yayas out, Johnny. You head back into the classroom and you're a little more focused.
It is wild. Just yesterday I have a friend who's a nurse. She's got 2 kids. I mean, she's 40. She's going to law school.
Awesome.
I'm like, it's amazing.
How cool is that?
Lots of people are doing this.
Yeah, I love that. Christopher says, I've heard way too many rumblings about the Golden Cat to dismiss it. Tracy says the UCP is not concerned about ethics. They changed legislation to allow for higher amounts for gifts. Pay to play is what we will record in the Alberta history books. I feel like, if real talk, does this show need to own a little bit of that? Do you remember after the Heritage Classic when the Edmonton Oilers hosted the Calgary Flames at Commonwealth Stadium and the Premier of Alberta was on the show shortly after, and we had a scoop. We had the exclusive that Danielle Smith had basically had roadblocks placed. So here's the deal, is that she couldn't appear in a certain suite there, or there was like some issue that precluded her from meeting with the commissioner of the National Hockey League, Gary Bettman. She told the story on the show. And then and of course, all of this leading up to the fact that now, Edmonton and Calgary are going to co-host the North American sect of the World Cup of Hockey coming up in 4 years from now, or 3 years, whatever it is, and yada, yada, yada. And there's all these negotiations. And of course, Calgary, the new arena construction. And there were all these reasons why you would suggest that the premier of the province needs to be able to sit down and have a conversation with the NHL commissioner.
Of course, yeah.
And I don't remember like the tiny little I can't remember the specific details, but she basically was on the show and was like, yeah, and according to like the current rules or whatever, I couldn't accept the access to the suite that would allow me to talk to the whatever.
Yeah.
And then I was like, you remember on the show, I'm like, well, maybe you guys just need to change the limits. But actually, I did. I'm going to own it. Otherwise, someone else will go down and dig it up and throw it in our face. So I'll own it. I was like, well, it just seemed ridiculous at the time that the premier of the province couldn't meet with the NHL commissioner. Someone will write in, and you will be 100% correct to say you don't need to have the conversation with the commissioner in the luxury box, drinking gin martinis.
Yeah.
You could always meet in the premier's office, or you could meet somewhere else. But then they did go ahead and they did change the limits on gifts. And it was kind of like, I remember looking at that as that was unfolding, and I was like, did we have something to do with that? Are we going to have
the gift limits
egg on our face?
Those are rookie numbers. We need to bump those numbers up. We also need a gold golf club in the studio here for Ryan.
You'll know as soon as you see a golden
You'll just
cat
see it on the corner
on the table.
Who's that from?
I'm not. Hey, listen.
It's a Saudi prince.
Obviously, we're messing around. I mean, if it did turn out to be true that the Premier of Alberta accepted a gift worth however many hundreds of, I mean, come on.
I think it's funny. For me, knowing just the Premier having been in here, and I don't think that's a mistake she would make. So yeah.
Well, she said the whole thing was cleared by the Ethics Commission. That would be the trip.
Yeah.
Accepting gifts is a different thing, and you've seen it. Like, politicians do have to be very careful about what gifts they accept, let alone which ones they would keep.
100%. And put on display.
Yeah. So, Dubia says, it's proudly displayed. Jill says she wasn't open about the trip. BoomShankerX says people don't care about the truth. They just care about the narrative. I mean, to a certain degree, maybe. I hope more people care about the truth. I hope that's something that we never stop caring about, you know? A bunch of people are sharing about their mature student stories. I love that. Keep those coming. You can always send us an email, by the way. If something that you're hearing about later, you're not in our live chat, that'll be the majority of the audience. You hear about it later. Send us a note anytime to talk@ryanjesperson.com. We want to get to a couple of your emails. This is, obviously going to be a bit of a hard swerve subject matter-wise. That's how we roll here on Real Talk. But some of you, many of you have been sending us very meaningful and firsthand accounts on, your perspective on medical assistance in dying and how you landed there. The context of this, of course, is Alberta adding some would call it barriers, some might say checks and balances, but Alberta's making it more difficult to access medical assistance in dying. That's a fact, and you're letting us know how it's impacting you. So we're going to get to a couple of your comments before our positive reflection. That's coming up in just a moment. Before we get there, if you are going to be hosting friends or family, or maybe you're going to be doing something, maybe getting your corporate team together, maybe you're inviting the neighbors over for Easter, whatever the case may be, our friends at Friesen Brothers making it easier than ever before for you to stay out of the kitchen and just enjoy quality time with your loved ones. This holiday or any holiday that you're observing, of course, they have their team of Red Seal chefs that do an amazing job all through the year on these dinner boxes. You literally pop it into the oven and you heat it up and you serve it. It's that simple. And there's no quality compromise. If anything, respectfully, let me use myself as an example, Johnny. I would never be able to prepare a turkey like the team at Friesen Brothers does. They do an amazing job. You mess up the turkey, you leave it in a little too long, it's dry.
Don't take the chance. You mess up the turkey. That's the base of the
chance. You know what I'm saying? So they have a couple different options, including this classic Easter dinner box. The price on this, I thought it was a typo. A chef-prepared Easter dinner box feeding 4 people, just $99 plus GST. Incredible. You can order those up until the 9th of April at cateringbyfriesen.com. And there's a couple other options as well if you really want to ramp it up. The signature Easter meal, again, at cateringbyfriesen.com. This one is going to feed 6 people for $239 plus GST. If you're feeding 60, just order 10 of them. Now we're talking roasted turkey, scalloped potatoes, creamy dill carrots, granny stuffing, Caesar salad, tray buns, cranberry sauce, turkey gravy, and apple crumble pie. Feed 6 for just $239 plus GST at cateringbyfriesen.com. And I wanted to just send a big shout out to every single Real Talker over the course of the 6 nights of UCAN Comedy Night. You were there. They were selling out those nights, raising a ton of dough for this amazing nonprofit charitable organization that helps young people out of harm's way and onto a path of economic independence. It wasn't just the night that I was there hosting a table on the 18th of March. The team at UCAN let us know that they were hearing from Real Talkers every single night there at Comedy Night. That means a lot to us, by the way, that you let them know and you stepped up in the silent auction, the 50-50, the live auction, everything that you were doing to help UCAN hit its fundraising goals. We're so proud to partner with UCAN as our charity of choice for 2026. If you're an employer and you're looking for reliable, trained, motivated, entry-level employees, you can connect with UCAN today. An amazing opportunity there for partnership and collaboration at ucan.ca.
Oh, I like that comment from Les, actually. I
What
was
did he say?
wondering. Well, I was just wondering that, too. If not to drag on the cat thing, I know you don't want to, but if Cameron Davies saw it in the office, what was he doing in the office?
Well, I'm trying to remember. I have to pull. I'm trying to remember. There was some connection. It's lost in the back of my brain right now. But Cameron Davies has been a player in Alberta politics for quite some time.
Sure.
And a lot of that stuff is behind the scenes.
Okay.
But I'm trying to remember. But these are always like when you start looking at these political relationships and people that will speak out, like start taking aim at a premier, and then you kind of start doing a little digging and better understand the connections before, and you realize that. When it comes to, I mean, another example I might use would be like David Parker with Take Back Alberta.
Sure. Yeah.
There's what I mean. They say there's no loyalty among thieves, but you look at like the Parker thing, and it's like
he had some access.
They work hard for the premier and to
Sure.
get Danielle Smith elected as leader. You remember, like when the UCP had their leadership race. Remember Travis Taves, the then finance minister, wanted to be the next leader, and there were others, obviously. And the Danielle Smith thing was like she got there with the help and the organization, the volunteer hours, the donations, and everything else from people like David Parker. And then we've talked about this on the show many times. I think a lot of what the premier has been doing and the UCP has been doing is to reward that support, right? Things like the changes in education, the library books that are being pulled, the parental notifications around pronoun changes, probably medical assistance in dying legislation to a certain degree. I mean, you see the influence there of the premier serving a socially conservative base. But, and I've said this on the show before as well, it's never enough for folks like David Parker. Well, it's never enough. And if they don't get enough, which would be a complete overhaul, then they'll turn on you. And I don't know if they'll stab you in the back. They more stab you right in the chest. And, and they believe, and Parker has a very inflated sense of his own power. You'll have people that'll write in right now, I guarantee, in the comments that are saying, David Parker's moment has passed. David Parker's lost his grip on whatever.
Well, the noise has definitely died down a bit. So, I will say, though, that Cam Davies, he probably won't be back in the office if he wasn't there very soon after that tweet.
Yeah, well, you can let us know what you think about this to talk@ryanjesperson.com. That's exactly, Johnny, where Shyla and Chantal connected with us following some of our conversations last week around medical assistance in dying. And we invite, obviously, your feedback here, maybe even based on what you're going to hear from Shyla and Chantal. But this is, really... I think once we get personal and once we better understand how, legislation, we talk about legislation, these are people's lives, real lives. Shyla writes in and says, bit of a heavy week, she says on Real Talk, she says, I really always, I appreciate variety of perspectives, even when conversations can be triggering. Says it's good practice for self-regulation. Says, please keep framing the MAiD conversation, medical assistance in dying conversation, as choice. People keep framing it as that. She says, but I don't think that the average Canadian understands what that actually looks like for individuals with developmental disabilities. My son Carson has lived his entire life being quietly questioned about his worth. The first time we were asked about his goals of care, he was a child going in for a routine dental surgery. She says, a child. Before he even had the chance to live or contribute, build relationships, show the world who he is, we were being asked to consider the limits of his life. And that changes how you hear conversations about MAiD. When a system already leans toward questioning certain lives, expanding access to death without fully addressing supports for living is not neutral. It says that's very dangerous. We also need to talk about something that people don't say out loud, and that is the quiet pressure of feeling like a burden. When supports are stretched, when families are exhausted, when systems fall short, it doesn't take much for someone to start believing that their best contribution is to not be here. And that's not real choice. She says caregiving can be hard, but it can also be deeply meaningful and connecting and full of love when it's properly supported. We should be building systems that make people feel valued and wanted, not like they need to step aside or make things easier for others. Shyla says, I thought deeply about my own future, and while I'm not a fan of suffering, I will not apply for MAiD to carry me through my elder years if it comes at the cost of my son continuing to be questioned through his life. I cannot separate my own choice from the broader impact on people like him. This is not about taking rights away. It's about ensuring that all lives are equally valued and protected, especially those who are marginalized and devalued every single day. She says, when Trish Bowman talked to you, she showed incredible courage in that conversation. You can check that out last week on our episodes. Says she was not attacking autonomy. That's what this is Ryan here now. We'll get back to Shyla's email in a second. This is what a lot of the critics of the changes to MAiD legislation in Alberta are suggesting, is that it takes away your freedom to choose. It takes away your health autonomy. Back to Shyla's email, she says she was standing up for safeguards around human life in a system that fails too many. And the way that she was dismissed and insulted in your comment section was deeply unfair to somebody who has dedicated her life to advocating alongside individuals with developmental disabilities and their families. Organizations like Trish and her team at Inclusion Alberta, they don't just protect, they build possibility. They give families hope. They open doors to inclusive post-secondary education, real employment through things like Rotary partnerships and meaningful lives in community. Not charity, not pity, but belonging and contribution and dignity. And that's the standard that we should be fighting for. Shyla says, until people like my son are fully, Carson, by the way, says, are fully supported to live a good life, conversations about assisted death will never exist on equal ground. She says, thanks for continuing the conversation. That from Shyla. And Chantal also checked in with her personal take on this. Says, I wanted to, and by the way, we want to thank, we won't have time to read all the emails. I want you to know we do our best to read every single email that we receive. Maybe not on the air. We try to respond to them all and keep them coming, because whether or not you hear your email on the show, we try to present a broad, an array of perspectives on this to give you a sense of where the audience is landing. But it also informs our editorial perspective behind the scenes. So it's always worth your time to send us an email. Chantal says, I wanted to touch base on the limitations of MAiD in Alberta that the UCP is imposing. I was diagnosed with rheumatoid arthritis 5 years ago. At the time, my kids were 1 and 4. I had no idea why. I was always tired, always in pain, not even to achieve simple tasks at home. My husband is away like 90% of the year for work. We see him basically on major holidays, and I have very limited family support here with my mom working full-time. My dad, a disabled veteran, type 2 diabetes, on dialysis, says leaning on anybody to do day-to-day tasks. She says, I'm talking about like meals for my kids, cleaning, folding laundry, driving anywhere for my kids to get a little energy out, or watching them play outside. It's not realistic. We don't live a lavish life. I can't afford to hire someone to do the work. She says, after nearly a year of trying to find out why my hands would swell up like balloons, why I couldn't even hold a phone, I couldn't send text messages anymore. I'd wake up shaking because of pain after just a few hours of sleep the night before. Falling asleep would be its own feat. I'd be thinking of ways I could try to stop the burning sensation in my arms or legs. Okay one day and then decrepit the next. I finally found a rheumatologist that took me seriously. X-rays, ultrasounds, blood tests, GP visits, poking, prodding. After being told I was just overweight, I needed to eat healthier. She says I was 140 pounds at the time. Chantal, I'm sure you also checked out our Women's Health Roundtable on Friday. If you didn't, man, oh man, this email's kind of doing double duty. She says, I have meds that have worked really well for me over the last 3 years or so, and I'm just so forever grateful for the coverage I have through my husband's union. She says 2 shots a month. Johnny, I think it's called Humira says it would be $3,500 for 2 shots a month, if you can believe it. Imagine that, like $40,000 a year for medication. Says that doesn't even include the methotrexate. I'm probably blowing that. She says $90 a week. It makes my skin burn in minimum sun exposure. So it allows me to get off the couch or get out of bed on a daily basis, but I can't be outside for long. I have to avoid leaving the home in summer. She says the meds are a lifesaver, but it means I can't do any intense exercise. I definitely can't go hiking. Playing sports is out of the question. Anything I loved prior to is basically off the table. Even now, playing with my kids for too long causes swelling in my joints, makes it painful for me that night and the next day. When I read stuff like this, it's just it's such a reality check on what people are living with and working with every single day. Chantal, unbelievable. Says this disease is punishing, and although it won't get worse thanks to medical advances, if my meds stop working, I am screwed. She said, before I found Humira, I tried 10 other medications that ranged from making me deathly ill to constantly tired, day in, day out, other adverse reactions, and says there's only so many options for rheumatoid arthritis, and once they stop working, you're shit out of luck. She says, for those that aren't familiar with the disease, it's an autoimmune disease. It essentially makes your body think that your joints are a foreign entity that must be destroyed. And so it's not only is extremely painful, but oftentimes you won't see the permanent consequences till it's too late. Nobody knows yet what causes it, but women my age with 2 or more children are more likely to be affected by it. Women in general are 30% more likely to have rheumatoid arthritis than men. If one day I cannot afford my meds or they stop working, I will be damned if the government tells me I have to live like this just to ensure that they can sleep better at night. The moves or changes to legislation sure as hell don't serve those who are borderline disabled and can't live a comfortable or productive life. Says, now I'm not at risk of death due to natural causes, so I wouldn't be able to apply for MAiD, especially under the new Alberta legislation. But I'm closer to being disabled than I am terminally ill, so where does this leave people like me? Chantal says, I'm okay at this moment. She says, I'll continue to enjoy life as best I can for my husband and for my kids. But the day I start to decline, I will consider other options. Nobody needs to have the burden of caring for their mom or their friend or their daughter. She says the Alberta government actually sent me a letter 2 years ago to switch my meds. They were working really well, but they wanted me on a generic brand because it's cheaper. And I straight up told the lady on the phone that if this doesn't work and I have to go back to laying on the couch crying while my kids are neglected, I will end my life. And she must have thought I was kidding, but I was dead serious, and I still am. It's morbid. It's sad, but no one should suffer needlessly against their will. I want my kids to grow up knowing they had a strong and good and loving mom who only wants the best for them rather than to see me suffer and do nothing daily. She says, thanks for getting this far in the email. She says, it just means a lot seeing you guys talk about this on Real Talk. And she says, and I think my sentiments might be along the same line as yours. You mentioned something about if you were diagnosed with ALS, you would want the choice to die with dignity. That from Chantal. And this is personal stuff. It means a lot that you share it. I do want to be clear. I make candid comments about my personal perspective on this. I always want to be careful as well at the same time, especially when invoking the name of a certain disease. Chances are there are people that are living with that disease that are going to hear that comment. The last thing, and I want to spell this out and be very clear about it, the last thing I would want you to take that as is me suggesting that that's the right way to address that or to move forward with it if you've been diagnosed with that. That's not my point. My point is just having seen family members or beloved friends grapple with certain things. I think of even, the Calgary Flames organization. You think of Kelsey Snow has been on the show before talking about her son's battle with ALS and just the incredible courage that he and they showed and everything. It's not there's never a one size fits all solution for any health scenario. But I did make a candid comment around there would be certain situations where as an individual MAiD might be something that I would consider. And I think that, many Canadians feel that same way. And there are also many Canadians who do not feel that same way. We talked a bit last week. If you follow us at Real Talk RJ on our social media platforms, thanks to everybody that does, you and I were just sharing our thoughts. I was talking about Catholic run healthcare facilities in Alberta and how it's been a real issue for some people to even get consultations around MAiD that are in Catholic run facilities. They've had to, leave the facility, head out to the bus stop or the sidewalk so they can have these conversations. And now this new legislation is creating a 150-meter zone around the hospital or the facility. So these folks are going to have to go even further. And it's a question around dignity. I mean, some of them are wearing hospital gowns. I mean, it's and they're in an end-of-life type scenario. And I was just commenting on that and how I think we need to have a bigger conversation in the province on faith-based organizations receiving public funds and refusing to provide public services. We should have that conversation. We are having that conversation. The point of me bringing it up now is I've heard from a lot of Catholics that are very unhappy about my perspective there or even bringing it up for debate. So I recognize that not everybody feels the same way about it. The good news is we have never had criteria here on Real Talk that we're only going to address things that everybody agrees on. As a matter of fact, quite the opposite. So if you feel strongly about this in any direction, Shyla and Chantal feel differently about it, obviously you can let us know. And I think that this, for example, is an opportunity for us to remind people about the value of a show like Real Talk, where people can speak freely, where they can say what they really mean, where we can spend a little more time talking about something as opposed to these 4-minute blocks on kind of the mainstream news. So keep the comments coming, friends. We really appreciate your participation here. Shyla is in our chat right now. It's amazing to see her in there. She says, I wish for Chantal to have better supports to live her life with care and dignity. That has been one of the big points that people have made. And I mean, as a matter of fact, we heard it from Trish with Inclusion Alberta last week, where she said, you know, the last thing you want, and I'm paraphrasing, the last thing you want is, you know, the Alberta government makes it more difficult for people to request MAiD, but then does nothing about the supports for those people outside of that end-of-life conversation. Mm-hmm. Like, are we making a commitment as a society? Are they making a commitment as a government to improve supports for people that otherwise may see MAiD as their last resort? You never want MAiD to be seen as somebody's last resort or something that they're being counseled toward or pushed toward against their will. You know?
I would like to hear from some of your friends, or maybe just anonymously on the other side as well, because you know, we've heard a lot of incredible emails from people, you know, who think it should be an option for people. I'd love to hear the other side.
Absolutely. Aaron in here is saying that, says what I'm saying is not true. Says I'm wrong.
About what?
I don't know. That's the point. I don't know what she's saying isn't true. But Aaron, send us an email to talk@ryanjesperson.com. We're never afraid of being corrected. We're never afraid of hearing another perspective. That's kind of the whole point of this whole show. I also see BoomShankerX in the chat, and maybe I'd read your chat comments, but instead I have a contribution here from BoomShankerX as a positive reflection.
Oh!
So there you go. Sure appreciate that, and appreciate our friends at Solar by Kuby. First episode of every week as we wrap. An opportunity for us to celebrate humanity, to focus on a positive. Sometimes it's a random act of kindness, somebody paying it forward. Sometimes it's just a thought shared that puts a little wind in our sails. And that's exactly what we got from BoomShankerX, who says, you know, 3 years ago, I developed a serious neurological condition. For nearly 2 years, I was barely able to walk. The balance and the visual center of my brain are malfunctioning, and I still struggle daily. But through great efforts and a wonderful medical team, I've managed to improve enough to share some normal experiences with my family, like a rare trip out to see an Oil Kings hockey game at Rogers Place. During the earliest and darkest time, I couldn't even look at screens, and so I was listening to podcasts to get through the day. And of course, Real Talk was how I started every day. I wrote into the show about the healthcare system, and Jespo read my letter on air, and he has no idea how important that was to me at the time. I think I might have an idea now, BoomShanker. Says illness can be a very scary, lonely, and isolating experience. And in the letter that I sent in was a photo of me and my girls, and to have Jespo and Johnny share it, the Real Talk community provide support to me, maybe not even knowing, has been a huge part of my recovery process. So thank you, Real Talk, for being a shining light in this dad's darkest hours. From BoomShankerX. The minute I saw that, I printed it off. I've been walking with it and looking forward to sharing it. Thank you for sharing with us. It just goes to show we never know the journey, the path that each one of us is walking. And in this community, we do truly find something special. And Johnny, I don't care if that sounds cheesy. I mean it from the bottom of my heart.
It's not cheesy.
And a message from BoomShankerX has been the reminder this week of why we do what we do. As a positive reflection, proudly presented by Kuby Renewable Energy. You can get a free solar quote today at kuby.ca. That's Kuby.ca. And of course, you can always send us your positive reflection to talk@ryanjesperson.com. Make it a great Monday, friends. We'll be back at it again Tuesday morning. Can't wait to connect with you then. One love.
Real Talk is hosted by Ryan Jesperson. Executive producer Josh Dunford. Technical producer John Hicks. General Manager Katie Cook-Chivers. Account Coordinator Lawrence Derlego. Human Resources Lena Shepard. Website design Mike Johnston. Voiceover by me, Carrie Skelton. Real Talk's editorial board is Supriya Dwivedi, Ahmed Ali, Brandy Morin, Ann Castleman, Corey Hogan, Harman Candola, Catherine O'Neill, and Chris Henderson. Member Emerita, Julie Rohr. Real Talk is recorded in Edmonton, Alberta on Treaty 6 territory, the traditional and ancestral territory of the Cree, Dene, Blackfoot, Saulteaux, and Nakota Sioux, home to the Métis settlements and the Métis Nation of Alberta. Real Talk is a relay project. For more, check out ryanjesperson.com.